Hi, folks. Carlos here. Thanks for joining the philosophy episode today. I get the pleasure of connecting with Chris Doe, someone who over time I've been able to build a friendship with, and I consider a mentor and someone I highly respect. This conversation started with no introduction. It was just an hour and 20 minutes of us jamming on certain things that were loosely planned and some things were quite improvised. So I hope you enjoy it. We talk about sales, mindset, what's happening with AI and the world of professional services pricing, ways to get more customers. So I hope you enjoy it and thanks for tuning in. Chris, so excited to have you back, man. It's been so long since we've had a conversation. We got a chance to jam together many times, not only in our Reframe event with Hector here in South Florida. I went to LA in your neck of the woods, and we were able to beta test an idea of our shared minds, both from our experiences around sales and mindset. And we did a few workshops together. And I just want to really dive in and start with just your reflections on doing some work together in collaboration. We were able to kind of observe some common themes, and you've had the opportunity to go around the world in building a version 2 and a version 3. And so I'm just curious from your point of view, like what are some things that you're noticing when you're leveraging these workshops and then from your experience in working with me?
Well, I first want to just give you your flowers for pushing me to run the workshop earlier than I would have. You know how creatives are. We'll sit around, we'll think about things. It's not right. It needs to be perfect. And then we wind up doing nothing. And you're like, I'm going to be in LA. There's this window. We got to do the workshop. And so we scrambled. We got something together. And that was the very first iteration of our workshops together. You have a background in sales. You've been trained. I do sales, but I've not been trained. So it was kind of interesting, the merger of our two minds and kind of like what we wanted to build. I think in iteration number one, it was very workshop driven, meaning we didn't talk a whole lot. We gave them exercise to do and they went through it. And we were very fortunate that some really super smart people wound up coming to the workshop. And so they had their own insights and discoveries. And I was just really grateful for that. But moving on from that, I was thinking, my gosh, we just threw them into the fire and asked them to kind of figure it out. And they did for the most part. But I wanted to make sure that if we didn't have such able-bodied people who could sort of figure it out on their own, we needed to structure it a little bit more. So thankfully, you and I have been able to do the workshop multiple times now. I've been able to do it on my own and also with other collaborators, just taking notes. Here's the biggest thing that I've found, not a solution, but a problem, which is every city that you go to brings a different mindset to it, a different personality and vibe. And we have to design it such that the majority of the people who go through the workshop have similar outcomes. And so we have to anticipate some of these mindsets or limiting beliefs or cultural norms that we couldn't have anticipated at the onset. And so this is really critical. And so I had to go through the process of refining the exercises so that they were simpler and more like bite-sized pieces that they can learn and practice, and so that they can gain some level of not mastery, but at least they understand the concepts and are able to internalize it.
Yeah, I've learned that teaching is very similar to selling. Where I mean by that is our journey of learning how to be effective teachers almost has the same lessons as the journey of being a great seller. A great seller needs to be a great listener, needs to know how to ask the right questions and be able to adapt based on the needs of the other person they're speaking with. And for you and I think because it was our first beta test going into this, we wanted to be very content heavy and show up over delivering value. I think salespeople also struggle with that. They feel like they're going to be valuable if they can just vomit out as much knowledge that they have around technical stuff, around, their ability to overcompensate. So I think our biggest learning lessons and what I loved about our partnership is our ability to catch that moment and in between the mini breaks do little huddles and say, why don't we condense this? Why don't, like, we're vibing a lot with them asking questions and us riffing in the moment. I think they're valuing that more, and we were able to adapt and be nimble. And I think, again, same lessons are applicable to someone in sales. Is sometimes you have to be prepared as much as you can, but you also have to be prepared to read the moment, be present. And I think those were some transferable lessons that I observed as well. When we were there, one of the things I really loved that we did is we did a pre session survey where they would rank themselves around specific skills. And then my favorite one was the listening skills. Like we had a lot of people say listening skills was my top thing. They ranked themselves a 5. And then when we actually did an exercise around listening, a lot of people had trouble being able to listen. They wanted to interrupt when the customer in the role play would speak, and then let me just tell you about my services. Let me tell you what I'm great, or ask another question. I guess, what insights have you had from that around listening and being present, and why does that exist so much in when professional service providers are in sales? Why are they in their heads so much?
There's a couple of things here. Number one is when you are talking about teaching is a lot like sales, but there is a big challenge there in that sales is usually done one to one, whereas teaching is done one to many. And so it's hard. Like if I sat down with you, I could do some coaching or consulting, do a diagnostic or discovery phase with you and figure out, oh, you're stuck here. And if you did this, this would work. And this would be wonderful, but it's not very scalable. So we're trying to read a whole room and react to the majority of the people and not get derailed by the 2 or 3 squeaky wheels and they get all the grease kind of thing. But getting into the teaching part, here's what I've learned. Listening is often an over-indexed skill that people think they have of, which they're not really good at. And the reason why is because people tend to bring too much additional narrative to what is being said, that they project a lot of other meaning into something that isn't there. They're reading too much into things, they're missing other things, and they're reacting to old conversations versus being fully present. So one of the things I've learned as I've added a whole nother section, which takes a half a day to do. It's just about listening. So I'll share with them something that a client might say. Then I'll ask him, like, what is meant, what is said, what isn't said, what do you think they really mean, what are the emotional triggers here, what are the gaps? And so they go through this exercise with me, and it's quite fascinating to me to see how much they're projecting old relationships onto this dialogue. So we have to do a bit of a palate cleanse to show them, where did you get that piece of information from? Because on the screen, what we're reading together isn't what you're responding to at all. And eventually they get it 3 or 4 reps in. So we're doing lots of reps. It's almost like mind-numbing work because they're like, why can't I get this? And if you give them enough shots at it, I think they start to figure it out. And that's critical. And that's why it's required for us to do this over longer periods of time. Here's my personal example. If I go and play tennis with my wife, my tennis game barely improves and may get worse because I'm not getting the ball fed to me in the same spot in the same way so I can respond to it and make little adjustments. She might hit it hard, she might hit it soft, I'm running all over the court. Too many variables. This is why a tennis coach feeds you the ball pretty consistently, or you have one of those guns that keeps shooting at you and you're able to work on your forehand or your backhand swing. So the repetition of a certain exercise over and over again, as boring as it might be, as brutal as it might be for some people, helps them to refine and make those adjustments. And I think that's one big insight.
Yeah, this reminds me of an exercise that I had back in my company. I think I told you about, which I was like, my God, it was exactly what you said. And it was the opportunity to help a banker who was trying to master how to communicate and articulate their what's called unique value proposition, right? It's like my role as your banker is to help you achieve your financial goals, and here's how I do it, blah, blah, blah. And we had 5 chairs of the bankers saying the value proposition. On the other side, kind of like musical chairs, but they're facing each other. The other people were the customers. All they were there was just to listen. And behind the customer standing was a coach. It was 5, 5, and the coach behind the banker. And after the banker finished, the coach would say, okay, here's what you did well. Here's what you need to improve. And then they would rotate the chair to the next one. So then again, the banker would try it again. The second coach will go, fix this next, fix this next. They were literally repeating the same exact activity, a little bit of feedback, a little bit of tweak, and until that person, essentially, when they got to the 5th chair, it was like, change nothing, you got it, right? And it's how can we help people see the value of repetitive, skill development with feedback from someone that can give you a perspective of something you may not be seeing, and the impact that it's having, whether it's tonality, delivery, word selection, and then ultimately in good form. Because in your tennis example, you could be, practicing tennis, but if you're practicing it with the wrong form, or you're holding the racket the wrong way with the wrong grip, you may practice that 10,000 times, but if you don't have the right form, have someone point that out, then you could essentially not not improve on that. So I thought that was very, very impactful.
Yeah, here's something else that I shouldn't say we, I ultimately ditched because I've tried many versions of it where you'd have a buyer and a seller and an observer, thinking that the observer, being neutral and free of bias, would be able to observe and write down the things and be able to be a mini coach in training. But it's like one of these things where the blind is leading the deaf and no one's understanding anything. And so they're getting pulled into the emotional component of it. They're not really listening objectively, or potentially the worst option is they're raining down too much violent judging language on the other person so that it's
Mm,
shutting people down. So I realized that that wasn't actually helping, because very rarely did we have an observer share an insight that was like, my God, that was it. Because that would have been the big transformative moment we're waiting for, and it didn't happen. So I have had to do many versions of this and scrap this exercise, change that exercise, and it's getting better. I think I'm two versions away from feeling like I think I got most of the workshop done.
yeah. And I think where we saw a lot of people get stuck, I mean, maybe in the format of a training environment, is when they're being observed, they're not themselves. And we had to tell them, is this you? And we
Right.
had to keep on asking me, is this you? Is this really you? And I forget his name. I think it was Leo that we had
Leo.
in LA, right? And then you had to stop him like 3, 4 times. And then in one of the scenarios, he just became himself, right? And
Yes.
it was like, where have you been this whole time? So it's really interesting when someone is being observed, how much the behavior changes. So it's really hard to help someone tweak or improve on what they need to do.
Yeah, there's that. And there's also people's expectation of who they're supposed to be as a salesperson. So
Mm,
they're following into some kind of self-imposed guideline or rules about how they have to model themselves to be a more assertive or directing the conversation. Their tone of voice changes, their body language changes, all this changes. And there's more to the story with Leo. Now, he was a really kind of like a well-dressed man. He had a lot of like swag, right? As the kids say, his drip game was on point. And it turns out he's like a world-class musician and an attorney, which was like, how did these two people resolve the conflict that must exist in their brain? I've had a chance to hang out with Leo at a concert where he was one of the two directors of this whole band, and he was the sweetest, most caring, thoughtful person. Like, he had a lot on his plate. He kept running into the green room saying, Chris, are you okay? Please make yourself comfortable at home. Is anything I need to do to make you feel more comfortable? If he used that same natural instinct to look after his prospects, he would
hmm
close way more deals. But he's been telling himself he has to show up a certain way.
Yeah.
And he sees it as combative versus being like a caretaker.
Yeah. And that could potentially be an observed behavior, whether it's you saw it in the movies or he saw it through a parental figure or a figure of authority. And he thought, well, I guess that's the way it is. And so oftentimes we have to break out of these conventional concepts or constructs that have been built and just be our authentic self. So I think one of the biggest takeaways for me when I finally stopped caring so much or being so nervous in selling conversations, and you'll probably agree with me, is when I stopped caring about the result. I just cared about the person, about that moment, about doing the right thing. I thought about if this was my cousin, right? If this was my mom, my dad, and I was to help them. Like I thought about in that sense, I was so more, my heart was more invested in just doing the right thing. And whether they decide to do it or not, like try to be unaffected. But I think what a lot of people get a lot of their nervousness or in their own heads is, am I too expensive? Do I negotiate so that should I win the deal now? Can I close it now? What if they give me an objection? How do I fight back? And so all of these things get in their own head during the conversation, which doesn't allow them to listen and be present. So the moment where, I started saying to myself before the conversation is the best way that I've heard it's described is the way Daniel Priestley shares it is the with or without you energy. It's like, I'm going to show up in service to this client. And I want to lead this back to your 4 agreements, which I absolutely love. And I praise by this over and over again. And I think it is so wonderful, right? Like if you can internally ask yourself these 4 questions before going into a conversation, I think you can really build yourself up to be in service for that moment. And so, where did the inspiration for this? How do you get yourself mentally ready to serve the client and kind of be detached for the outcome. I guess that's where I'm curious from your point of view.
Okay, the four agreements in which you're referencing is actual real book with a real fan following, and I just borrowed the title and changed the agreements, right?
Yeah.
And I was sitting here thinking about this where people fail in sales because they tell themselves a story that they're not good enough, that they don't actually deserve this conversation. So what I needed to do is take everything that they were thinking and turn it into a rule, which we must agree and abide by before we can actually do any sales training. It helps us with lots of different things because if you're a fraudster who have not put in the time and energy to get good at something and you're out there learning sales things, well, you can say, well, you're selling a lot of hot air. You may get a client, but you're going to burn a lot of relationships. So I started to think about everything that they would say and then write rules and then which we can just sign a piece of paper and say we all agree to this before we can move forward. That way, during a sales role play or conversation, we can literally point to and say, which of the four agreements have you broken? And the four agreements or something like this is still a work in progress. So the language changes a little bit as I do it. First is like, do we do good work? We have to accept that we do good work, that we put in the amount of time, energy, and resources to be good at our craft. Whether we've been trained in school, we've done a lot of deliberate practice, or been mentored or coached by somebody, that we actually have the experience. And this is the first agreement for a very important reason, because if you don't do good work and you don't believe you can do good work, well, don't go selling anything then. Go back to school, go back to getting an apprenticeship and just practice more and more. Be a better student at this. Number two is to address the whole situation of the price imbalance that people perceive, that the price is going to exceed the value you create. So agreement number two is I will always deliver more value than what I charge.
Mm-hmm.
This frees us up from any artificial limitation or ceiling on what it is that we can charge. Because if I'm paid $100, I'll give more value than 100. If I'm paid 1,000 or 10,000 and it scales to 100 or to a million, 100,000 or a million, then my obligation is to deliver more value than I charge. Then I don't have to feel bad about charging more. Number three is always act in the service of others, to hold their needs ahead of your need to make money. And this one is a tricky one because we do things that we think is the service of others. But when we're driven by our agenda to sell a product or a subscription or whatever outcome we want, we're not really acting in the service of the other person. And professionals do this all the time. They sell you things that they know aren't helpful, that you don't need because it helps you make your numbers, or you get the award for that month or whatever it is because you sold X number of units of worthless things. Here's a classic example. When you go to rent a car, they're obligated to always ask you about this extra insurance. You don't have to worry about anything. Or they try to sell you the whole, we'll fill up the gas tank for you. Mm-hmm. But they charge a premium for both of these things. What most people don't realize is if you have a good credit card, the credit card has a policy for rentals that covers most of what they're going to cover anyways. Right. Unless you get into a horrific accident, you're okay. So that's a pure profit center from them. So in that regard, you could argue, you can make an argument both ways. They're not actually acting in service of the customer. Yes. Now they could say, well, if you get into a horrible accident and you don't have that kind of credit card or your policy falls short, then this will cover you. The more honest way that we would do this, if we're living to the four agreements, is to say, what kind of credit card are you going to use to rent a car? Well, for that credit card, this is the policy. It covers this. And if you want above and beyond coverage, you can elect to do this. But I'm not telling you what to do, but I don't think you need it. That would be the really honest way to do it. And how refreshing would that be for us to actually have that kind of conversation in all facets of our life versus people trying to make numbers or to get a bonus for whatever it is they're doing. Yeah. Number four is something I might want to revise because it's even more confusing than number three, is to always act with integrity, to do the right thing no matter how costly it is to you. Do the right thing. And here's the problem is everybody thinks they're doing the right thing and they're acting in ways that are ethical, that are consistent with who they see themselves as. But when you actually get into the role play, they're breaking more than one of these four agreements. So I might change number four to something else. It's something I've been thinking about a lot, Carlos.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you mentioned about acting in service of others. I think that what's crazy about this is that I used to work in a commission sales environment or in an incentive-based environment. So I felt that I was a leader who was driving numbers before, right? Obviously, I left that world because of this high pressure. It wasn't the right thing for customers. I mean, a financial institution that was known for a scandal about
Yep, yep.
fake accounts. Guess what? I was in that leadership team when they were trying to teach that culture, and I was like, I'm not for this. And so I know like how people can behave when they're doing things in the interest of I gotta hit this or I'm gonna get fired. I gotta hit this or I'm gonna get written up. I gotta hit this number or I'm gonna get $100 bonus because of it, and it's wrong. I think what's different being a professional service provider is that you are the one who sets your own goals as to where you want to be. And I fairly think that most professional service providers are noble and in the service to help others, at least in my experience. The problem is that they think that they're perceived what we think about these incentive based, these shark type of salespeople. So they get in their own head and they get in their own way. So I really love these not just as the agreements when we go into role play, and I know you also mean this, is these should be the affirmations you tell yourself before going into a client conversation as a way to build yourself up as a person who is a high value expert that also values yourself. Hey, look, I do good work. The work that I do will always exceed in the value compared to the price that you invest. I will do this with integrity, and I will do it in service to you. If it's not the right thing, I'm going to be honest enough to tell you we're not a fit. And being able to go in with that energy, I think, is a positioning strategy, is an authority building piece, right? Because you having the courage to be able to say no to someone, I think makes you even more attractive, more desirable. We're like, whoa, why are you rejecting me? Right? Now it takes courage to do that, right? And I think it is a journey. But I just wanted to share that observation. Is like we need to help professional service providers like get out of their heads with thinking that they're perceived like the car salesman across the street and they need to just move forward with just courageously and surprise themselves when they see themselves at the end of it when their clients are like, yeah, let's do business.
Yeah, a lot of times we have this close at all costs mentality, and it comes at all costs. It comes at the cost of your own integrity, of making promises you cannot fulfill, of poor fits, like you're recommending products and solutions that you know in the long run it's not going to serve the clients well. So this will be a kick the problem down the road kind of situation where 6 months from now, after you've delivered and are long gone, they're going to realize this didn't actually solve my real problem.
Yeah. I think it's terrible for your brand to say yes to something that you may not fully know how to solve, like a problem. And if you're learning on the customer's dime, I learned my lesson in doing that once and I would never do it again. It was a very expensive lesson. And I'm sure you've had your own, where I took on someone outside of the industry that I was familiar with. And I tried to overcompensate by doing all these things for them. And they kind of saw through it. He didn't see value. He didn't see the outcomes that he was expecting. He saw my lack of industry specific niche knowledge that he wanted and he stopped paying me. And
Mm,
I was like, in his defense, I'm like, yep, I think I said yes to the wrong thing. And
yeah,
it was in the interest of surviving, right? Of
right.
trying to get any deal that I can. And I think people with poor systems that don't have the right strategy, the client that they want, and they try to become an everything for everyone will find themselves repeating themselves in this cycle. And ultimately it's bad for their brand reputation. So we have to grow out of that.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. So I want to ask you something else about, one of the reasons why I admire so much of your thought leadership and your point of view, not just because I'm not a creative designer, but you bring a very universal approach to business and to conversations and just a philosophy overall. And in your Pocket Full of Dough book has these concepts around sales, marketing, beliefs, pricing, creativity. I'm probably missing one of them. But I'm thinking this book was released probably by 2018 or something like that.
Sounds about right.
And lately, there's been a lot of different things that have happened. I think some of those things still hold true, but I am curious if you had a Pocket Full of Dough version 2 2025 update, what would be two or three things that you would add to that book that would be essential for readers now or for people that are practicing in the world of professional services, creativity?
I wrote the book as a time capsule of what I've learned in experience and also from what I was taught. So every year is an opportunity for me to grow and change and evolve as a human being. And the book is written as a kind of a collection of the best wisdom or experience I have to share with the reader. And you can read a page at a time and stop because they're not continuous, they're not sequential, and you can read and stop wherever you want. And people find it to be valuable. I'm writing it for the person who doesn't love to read, who may have some attention deficit disorder, so that they can walk away with something, ponder it, and then figure out how to apply it. Moving forward, though, I think now I need to go deep. Instead of covering lots of different ideas, like 6 or 7 different subjects, I would just want to go into 1 or 2. So the books that I would write today are going to go deep, but in a very similar fashion and style. There's an economy of words. Really big ideas is still done as simply as possible and not to belabor the point. I notice when I read books on marketing or whatever, they'll tell you what you need to know, but they'll delay that with a really long story or the research, and then they tell you what you need to know, and then they go and say to you over and over again. I get the feeling that they're just making a page count versus like making every page count. And that's a big difference there. Right? And you know this. You're like, we already went over this concept. I'm reading it over again and again. And so I'm much more preferring of like writing thinner books that are going to be read, consumed, and then applied more than anything. So hybrid workbook style things that ask you questions, share some stories, but give you things to do so that you can apply what you've just read immediately. So I'd probably do a book on sales, which I think is the natural thing I'm going to do. And then the next book that I'll do after the sales book is probably one on personal branding. I feel like there's a need in the marketplace to clarify what personal branding is. It feels pretty hot of the moment, and there's a lot of dissenting voices in the world telling you what it is, and I disagree with most of them. So I think it's mostly reactionary that I want to silence them, but I can't unless I put out my own definitive version of what it is I'm thinking. I'm doing this in lectures, I'm doing this in workshops, but I haven't turned it into book form just yet.
Yeah. I think it's going to be brilliant, whatever it is that you do talk about. But I do agree that ever since I've gotten to the world of learning about the importance of personal branding, I am just becoming more observant. Like one of the comparisons that I've been using lately in some of the things that I'm teaching is if you follow a soccer team's Instagram, they have 1.5 million followers. But if you follow Messi's Instagram, he's got 700 million of them. If you're looking at Nike right now, which is something I recently saw, is like their stores are losing a lot of market share because you've got professional athletes that are opening up their own personal brand, like Roger Federer with On. And there's probably way more case studies that you know than I do. And this is happening in real time. And people follow people. And the more that we can understand how to act courageously and moving ourselves forward as a brand, I think we're going to have a greater edge for those of us who are entrepreneurs that are trying to build a followership and build a business. And there are ways to do that effectively. I look at you and you have different systems and processes, and I'm sure you're also trying to stretch. How do I still leveraging my brand of me and what I've built without me necessarily being directly involved, but having the ethos or my system or my framework where people feel like they're still getting a Chris Do experience. And I'm sure that is quite a conundrum of its own, but I see that being extremely valuable. Well, one thing that you didn't mention that I thought you were going to mention is, and a lot of people are starting to ask about this, is storytelling and how important it is in being a great communicator. Because as AI comes in to help us automate a lot of tasks, I think the human to human connection is going to be leaning much more on our ability to communicate our thoughts and ideas from a unique point of view. Ever since humanity started, people would gather by the campfire to listen to stories as ways to tell morals and lessons and convey certain messages indirectly. And I think you have a really effective way of doing that, but I think that would be a very useful. Is that something you thought about of how to workshop helping people telling their stories? Because I think personal brand is part of telling their stories. So I'm guessing,
Yes.
Does that go hand in hand?
Yeah. I mean, there are, I guess, skills, and then there are core skills that are below those that can be chained together. So when we're talking about building your personal brand, storytelling is a big part of it. And storytelling is a combination of how you perform the story and also how you write the story itself. And so then now we have to talk about copywriting. And so there are many subsets of skills that we need to develop. But you're absolutely right. So probably sales, personal branding, storytelling, something probably about raising the creative child, because people ask me now about parenting advice and they like my perspective, and it feels very different than how they were raised and how they see other people doing it. I literally just got off a call, mostly women, I think all women, and they were asking me about how I raised my sons. And so we talk about the differences between maybe men and women, or how I do it versus other men. I don't know, but I have a unique perspective on this, and I'm really happy with the way my kids turned out. I'm super thrilled that they're becoming their own person, and I'm trying to do as little harm as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're right about that. But let's get into Nike for a second, okay?
Let's do it.
And then we'll talk about personal branding. So I don't know that much. I don't know the full story, but I believe some of Nike's problems were self-inflicted over a year ago. And it's not necessarily dealing with personal brands per se. It's because Nike decided they don't need retailers anymore. They're going to go direct to consumer. And they don't understand the whole sneaker culture, the collectible market, and they don't know how to manage it themselves as well as these other stores would be able to do. So Nike's business model is, we release shoes that no one can buy. We make it really difficult for you to buy, which creates a halo effect for the shoes that you can buy. And this follows the Rolex business model. It follows the Ferrari or Porsche or Lamborghini model. You have to buy so many shoes in order for you to be able to get access to the other shoe. There's like this scarcity that's built into the program. So they do very limited drops with like to collab with other designers or artists. And then they drop those and no one can seem to buy them. So it creates this healthy gray market or aftermarket where people can buy, and then the regular person's like, I'm going to buy a shoe kind of like that. And that's how they keep their kind of cool edge. But they cut out most of their third party, so they stopped carrying their shoes, which gave room for other kinds of shoe brands like On or Hoka, the really chunky sole one, to then fill the store shelves, and they burned their relationships. They had lost a lot of money, and they opened the door for Adidas, at least in the United States, to come in and eat a lot of their market share. Big mistake. Things like Foot Locker or Champs or those sporting goods stores that used to carry them couldn't carry them anymore, but then now are carrying them again because they're trying to rebuild those relationships. So it's a massive misstep. Reason number 2 is Michael Jordan is pretty old and pretty long forgotten, and LeBron James is kind of there, but they need to constantly build superstar athletes that will move billions of dollars of shoes, and the market's becoming harder and harder to concentrate into like 1 or 2 athletes, and it's very tough to do these days. So they need to adopt a new strategy. Reason number 3 is, I don't think of Nikes as very fashionable shoes. They might be designed well, manufactured well, have good sole technology, which is very important, but they're not innovative. Like, I don't see their shoes as being fashionable. The sneakerheads are going to get really upset at me, but I put it out there. The best shoes that they've ever made are not designed by them. It's designed by their collaborating partners. So it's kind of wild. Like, their own in-house design team doesn't understand sneakers as fashion footwear, as casual things versus performance things. And so Adidas has a long history of blending casual footwear to performance things and being able to be part of the zeitgeist, the conversation. And so those are the things that are hurting their sales. Now, you put on top of that, people are able to leverage more lucrative deals with smaller shoe companies where they own a bigger portion of the brand, or perhaps they're getting a higher percentage of the royalty. And so that's kind of like behind the scenes stuff that I do not know about.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of disruptive things, and they're just trying to, they're not being innovative fast enough to lead the market. And there's just a lot of people just flooding the gates with different, better technology and better support from
It's better design.
better design.
Because they can make anything. I go into a Nike store, flagship store in New York City. I forget what it's called, like the Innovation Center, right? Where they sell very exclusive shoes with cash in hand. And I can't find a shirt, a cap, or anything to buy because they don't understand the aesthetic of the streetwear person or someone who's looking to not look like a kid anymore, right? They don't understand. Or I don't want to look like a jock. It's not purely about performance. Whereas I go into an Adidas store, I have to be a little careful with my money because it's like, ooh, I want that. Maybe I want this now, right?
There's more things.
Yeah, that are kind of appealing to me. Okay, let's move off that now and let's get into personal branding.
Let's do it.
What is it that you think? What do you think the audience needs to know about personal branding?
Well, lately, and this is my own personal journey, All
Mm-hmm.
right, so I'll tell you 3, 4 years ago, I was so excited about my company and my logo and the name of it. And I was like, when they see it, it's going to be brilliant. And I've been more and more realizing that it's all because they do business with me, right? My company's just kind of a shell that
Right.
encapsulates, what it is that we do. And lately with some other mentors and guidance, it's like the personal brand has it's a stronger weight to it. And I guess it's what's the difference between like why do people struggle with wanting to put everything under the company name and hide behind it? And why is it so much more important now than ever to have a unique point of view, to have a personality, to be somewhat, I don't want to say contradictory, but just be like the more you are, the more you are, right? I think I said it wrong probably.
No, you said it right. I was really proud of you to say that. Wow.
Um, and it's like, yes, and people are leaning into that more, but then they're just afraid to be vulnerable, right? And so that's been my personal journey, but I've seen like everyone who wants to hire me that's like, how do you help me get more clients? And I want to be able to attract higher paying clients. And this is what I'm thinking. It's going to be my website and I have the logo and it's going to be this company. And I'm like, where's your face? Where's your name? Who are they dealing with? Why does it have to be mysterious? And I was thinking about this myself too. When I see a website with someone's face, with seeing their resume and see it, I feel more connected to that person. When I see a website with just a bunch of logos and we are and our team and let us and that kind of language feels I'm less connected to that. So I was just wondering, this is my basic description of that, but from your point of view, since you have more technical knowledge, what does that all mean, Chris?
Okay, a couple of things. If we zoom out a little bit, some things have changed in the media landscape that creates the opportunity for this moment. There's a real reason why we're having this conversation at this moment in time and not 10 years ago or 20 years ago. The advent of social media, the ability to bypass gatekeepers and media networks to have direct conversations with the people have changed the game. So it used to be you would get most of your news and entertainment from 3 TV channels or 4 newspapers or 5 magazines or something like that, right? I'm making up random numbers there. And so there was a whole process on who can speak, who's worth listening to, and that has been all broken down. So currently right now, Carlos Garcia, you can create a piece of content and speak directly to potential buyers and fans or people who want to support you, investors directly. And it's a beautiful thing. It took us a little while to figure this thing out. So what folks are realizing now is we don't buy products. We buy the story that are contained within the products, and who better to tell the story than people? Now, the problem is we also have a general bias against committees. We know that government is inefficient. We know that all good ideas die in committees, right? That's if you want to have a good idea die, send it to a board to talk about. And so when we see language like we, us, our, then it's like, well, who is we, us, or our? And it tends to be a composite of a lot of different thoughts and ideas, and then squeezed through legal, through PR, through strategy, and through marketing. You get something that's very, very watered down and generic. Nothing is being said. There is no point of view, no positions taken, with the exception of a few companies who know who they are. The example would be Patagonia. Mother Earth, or our home planet, is our number one client. The message is loud and clear. With Oatly, it's like milk, but for people. Shots are fired. There's a very strong point of view. In fact, their internal marketing department, their own internal branding division, is called the Ministry of Mind Control. You can tell they take their work seriously, but they don't take themselves seriously, right? They're serious about the work, but not themselves. And so it's quite interesting. So what brands are trying to do, corporate brands are trying to do now, is to lean back into the founder story, to try to bring that back up, like Jack and Jack in the Box, or Colonel Sanders in KFC, or Wendy's, the story of Wendy's and Dave. They're trying to bring those stories out so you know who they are. So here's the weird thing. Brands are trying to be more like people, but people are behind the curve. So they start to try to behave more like brands, hide behind the corporate shield, quite literally and figuratively, right? From a legal point of view, and also behind the emblem of the company. And we're afraid to say things because we're so concerned about alienating potential customers. The new thought on this is we want to hear the story from real people who we are going to make a quick decision that I get this person. This person's relatable to me. Their story, their skin color, their struggles in life is something I feel like I'm going through and I want to support you. So Anna Lappe said this thing, every dollar you spend is a vote for the world that you want to live in, more or less, right? So you and I as a consumer with an abundance of choice, we get to decide we want to support that water company, that brand of bread, or that brand of alcohol, whatever it is we want, because we want them to win. And by virtue, if we want them to win, we could care less if the others lose. And so what we have to do is we have to give people a reason to care about us. We have to say, here's what I stand for, plant my flag in the ground and say, those of you who are interested, join this tribe. Those of you who are not, do not join this tribe. Here's the thing. I'm not a historian, but I do watch a lot of shows. In medieval times, in kind of feudal society, we would form villages and you would have a lord or something and you would create a banner, you would create an icon. So you have colors and you have an icon, you'd create a family motto or crest or something. And we say, we all believe the same thing, we're going to look out for each other. So when some foreigner came in and threatened us, we would come together, we'd fight off that foreign attack. What would happen is these tribes would grow and grow and grow, and they would butt up against another tribe, and the stronger of the two would become the new tribe, and they'd get bigger and bigger, and eventually becomes a kingdom and a king and a ruler of a place. And so we start to lose this identity of we're from the north, we're from the southeast, we're losing that identity, and now it's coming back to all that stuff. So when you have a point of view, your motto, your credo, what you believe in, you have your colors, your logo, you are the icon of you. And people are like, well, I'm with Team Chris, or I'm with Team Carlos, and I'm going to support what they're doing because when they win, I feel some sense of ownership over their victory. And I want the other people they battle, their competitors, to lose. And so when you hide behind the shield of the corporation, you're basically becoming a generic faceless thing that people do not connect to.
Yep. And I also think that some people who are trying to get into personal branding, they're still sort of walking around eggshells, saying the right things, saying the right language, not wanting to be opinionated because they don't want to ruffle the feathers, but then they kind of just get stuck in the sea of sameness. So to your point, planting your flag about personal opinion about something is going to create very few amount of loyal people who are in alignment with your view, and probably plenty of haters out there that are going to be against your point of view, but not wanting to stay in that middle. And there was a moment where I have more generic educational kind of intention when I come out there. There are things that are either from my personal experiences, things that I believe, or things that are just factual. They've been studied, right? They could all be backed up. But I'm not of the type who will have like a really big controversial opinion to try to stir some stuff up. I know you do a really great job in the way you create content. Hey, trigger warning, I'm about to say something that's probably going to set you off. It's a great way to, hey, look, hate is going to hate. It's your choice to swipe right if you want to keep going here. I think that's a really great way to frame it. But there was a moment where I saw someone post in a Facebook group, and I'm a consultant of a specific software, where they said, this software is crap. They're just trying to take advantage of us. They're trying to do this. And I literally went, respectfully, I disagree. I've worked with them for 3 years. I know the owners. They've been nothing but professional with me. You may want to consider this. You may want to consider that. Da, 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 da. And the person goes, sure, you're doing that because they sponsored your event. And I'm like, oh, crap. Like, I'm about to get into a fight with someone. And lo and behold, 3 or 4 people replied to her, kind of defending me, right? I think you're wrong. Like, they've treated me really well. Like 3. And by the way, Carlos is excellent what he does. And I'm just like, this is what it feels like when you have the guts to go in there and just say what you want to say, knowing that you're going to be at risk that someone's going to be disagreeing with you. So I think sometimes it does take courage to have a personal point of view. And those that just kind of stay in that safe middle, they're not really going to make a lot of progress in wanting to be remembered as a personal brand. So I want to transition to one thing that I took away from a personal branding course I took with you, which you asked the question, what makes someone magnetic? And we broke out into groups and we came out with all these words, right? And we ended up coming back with 3 words. You want to share what those 3 things are? I know what they are, but I know that you know them by heart.
Yes, and I've modified them a little bit too.
Okay.
So when we see people who have a magnetic personality, who are very charismatic or attractive, not physically attractive, but who can attract people to them, who hold some kind of like magical quality or an aura. We use a lot of different language.
By the way,
Their
that's a Gen
vibe,
Z term now. You
is
got
it?
aura. Yeah. So if
Okay.
you hear anybody like under 18 say aura, it's like, okay, go on.
Yeah,
Sorry.
there's lots of language that we use to describe this thing. And we say, look back into history and across time, which kinds of people were able to draw people to them that they're ready to do whatever they want them to do together. And when you think of this person, what are the traits that they exhibit such that they're able to do this? And when we start to unpack this, it starts to become really interesting because then we might have a shot at doing it too. Okay? So I've modified it a little bit. Here's what happens. First, there's this thing that you have to become self-aware.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who am I? And what do I stand for? And what am I doing? How does this impact people? And how do people perceive me? There's self-conscious, but self-aware is the next evolution of being self-conscious. Self-conscious is just thinking about yourself through your own lens all the time. Self-aware is adding the layer of how do other people perceive me, what it is I'm doing. So the next step on the evolution is, well, now that I know who I am and how people perceive me, I accept myself. So self-awareness leads to self-acceptance, which is really important, and ultimately self-confidence or self-confident. So we are attracted to people who are very confident. And there's a big difference here between arrogance, self-importance, and self-confident, right? If you look it up in the dictionary, I believe, it'll say a belief in one's ability to solve problems. It's not what you think it is. I have a belief that I have the ability to solve problems, no matter what problem I see. Okay, so if I'm in that place of self-confidence, I'm going to start to attract a lot more people to me. And I forget what the other two are. Can you remind me really quickly?
Well, it was vulnerability,
Yes.
confidence, and
Yes.
self-awareness. What was the second layer? Like what happens after self-awareness?
Self-awareness leads to self-acceptance,
Self-acceptance.
which then leads to self-confidence. So I can't just say to be self-aware and then self-confident, because I mean, there are stages that you go through. You just have to kind of figure out where you are in that thing. Okay. So number 2, if I can recall, is to be really vulnerable. And vulnerability is different than what a lot of people think. People use false vulnerability, which is, I'm going to tell you a story about a time in which I've really struggled because I want you to feel bad for me. Like there's this lens of victimhood where we tell people. That's not what vulnerability is to me. Vulnerability to me is the willingness to share both positive information and negative information about ourselves. And when we can do that, then people start to say, like, you know what? Because we don't trust perfect people. We want to know that you got some flaws. We want to know you struggled, and we want to know what your shadow self would reveal. Otherwise, we feel like you're holding back and you're hiding something from us. I think there's a term, it's called the Stepford wife, which is like a super perfect, like dinner's always ready and always use a perfect language and always kind and well-tempered. It's not real.
Mm-hmm.
Real people have real emotional moments and they have vulnerabilities and they have parts of themselves that they don't love, that they wish were different, but they've learned to accept it.
And it's interesting that the evolution of Instagram, I remember just being 20 something when it just came out. And it was ideally this like innocent way for you to share pictures of like you doing things. And in some cases, because it was innocent, like you would just take a picture of your cool coffee and say, I'm having coffee today. Or it started to evolve like as a competitive thing to say who's got the better highlight picture or the highlight reel. And all of a sudden it becomes this facade of everything being always amazing. And then it created the comparison trap of people now feeling terrible because they're not living in a highlight reel. It's so crazy how psychologically it can become so risky and damaging. And then all of a sudden the cycle of itself evolved into when you can show that other side of yourself, that's your full authentic self. Now you actually become more magnetic. So it's kind of interesting how the evolution of that through the social experiment of something like social media has actually essentially gotten us to where we are now, which is this is what's real and that's what people want.
Yes. But this has happened long before social media was invented, because if you know a photographer from Architectural Digest has come on over to your house guess what? You're going to be cleaning, curating, organizing, stacking, so it's going to look as photogenic as possible. And we would expect that of you, because if they came over and socks were here and there was dirt on the wall and the curtains are dusty, it's like, oh, this is not going to look good. This is not. So we automatically curate. We do this all the time. When people ask you, how you doing? You're not going to tell them, yeah, I crapped my pants earlier today. You just tell them the highlights, right? So there's this level of curation that's happening, to the degree of which starts to stretch us away from being fake. And I have a slide on this, right? There's the real you, and there's the persona, the person you pretend to be accepted by society. So the amount of inauthenticity is determined mostly by the gap between those two parts. The real ugly you when no one's watching, and the person you show up. Like, I didn't just roll out of bed this way. I don't wear a tie to bed and layers of jackets to talk to you. But I do that because this is how one shows up for a professional conversation that's going to be shared with thousands or more. We got to do that. So I'm in a persona right now because this isn't me walking around the house all day long, because it's actually not super comfortable to be able to do this. So there's a level of inauthenticity that's happening, but it's not so much so that in my normal life I'm a complete slob and I have no idea what I'm doing. That would create this giant kind of chasm that exists between these two things that you pretend to be. Here's what's really important, Carlos, because I think you dipped into this in your earlier question that I want to circle back to, which is, when you meet somebody in real life, who are you? This is the danger of over curation and pretending to be somebody that you're not. Because when they meet you in real life, if you're not an outgoing, happy person and you're really grumpy, now there's this kind of dissonance that exists between the perceived you, or how you project yourself into the world, and the real you. And so then the expression comes, be careful of meeting your heroes because they're bound to disappoint you.
Mm-hmm.
You've heard this expression, right? So when you have a whole team of people writing your words, editing you out so you're a really smooth and articulate person, when you go up on stage and you don't have all those people to support you, and it's hard for you to string together 2 or 3 coherent sentences without an editor fixing all the gaps and the ums and the filler words, then people are like, whoa, that's a very different version of you. And that's the problem.
Yep.
I think, to a degree, leave some of the mistakes in there so that when you show up, you don't have to feel like you have to live up to some version that's almost unattainable. This is really important. So I'm always delighted when people meet me. They're like, oh my God, you're a lot funnier than I thought.
Yeah.
You're really nice, and you're exactly who you pretend to be on camera. I'm like, doesn't everybody? Truth is, that's not the case at all.
Yeah. I think there's some interesting quality to also being a bit mysterious. I know that you didn't know that, well, maybe you did through conversation, but there are certain things that I may have surprised you. And as you've been getting to know me, right? I'm a bilingual Venezuelan who plays the guitar that also has done improv. And, I like to dive into all these interesting types of hobbies. I don't showcase that in my personal brand as much as I probably could or should. I'm still trying to figure out how to do that, because I definitely could, right? Like, I love bringing laughter, but I think some of this kind of work requires some seriousness to it. And there are things that, when you and I have gotten to know each other, you've shown me sides of you or tastes that you have in comedy and in up and coming things that I wasn't aware of, fashion, and things like that. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, you do talk about it, but I think the mystery also kind of maintains maybe a curiosity gap or some intrigue, and like, there's more to that. And do you think that that's a factor in personal branding?
It can be, and it's a throwback to an earlier time where there's tabloids and gossip magazines where it's like, what is this person eating for lunch? Because they don't want to tell you. So it creates a whole industry for paparazzi. And I don't know what we call them, these journalists who report on things like, oh, this person's getting divorced. Well, this person's so famous and so liked or loved, and we want to know everything about them. It creates this whole other industry that's really dark, I think. Okay, so how do we get ahead of that? So instead of some famous person like not revealing anything about themselves, maybe they just tell us what they're eating and we don't have to worry about it anymore. That'll feed the social channels. That will satiate people, but it also rob the paparazzi from running around trying to report on you all the time. Because if you say it first, well, there's no market for this anymore. You're not getting the scoop. And so if you just come out and tell people, I think it's okay. Now, I'm not trying to be mysterious for the sake of generating a curiosity gap. I think people are curious about what my thoughts and feelings are, my preferences. I just don't have the capacity to report on all the things I'm doing because I don't think it's that interesting. So it naturally creates that desire to know more. And then in more intimate circles, when somebody really is expressing interest, like, I want to know this about you. What did you do here? And you're like, oh, I'd love to share that story with you. And if you want to juice it up a little bit, you're like, and don't tell anybody because I don't speak about this on camera, right?
Right.
And then they feel really special and they're brought into the inner circle, so to speak. And there's no amount of talking that you could do where you could reveal everything there's to know about you. You'd probably bore people to death. So it's naturally built in. I wouldn't try to create or leave out things to create a gap for mystery or curiosity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. I was curious for your point of view on that. Okay. I figure with whatever time we have left, the other thing that we did last year that was very repetitive and it was a common theme when we did the LinkedIn audios and we did a lot of these things is the title was called Get More Customers. And so I figured maybe we can play a game. It's a
Okay.
rapid fire round game where I literally have not prepped for this. So I want to see if we have good improv skills where you give me an idea that we can give to someone who sells creative services or professional services of how to get more customers. And then we throw it over to me. And then we go back and forth to see until someone just says, okay, I don't have any more ideas. See how many we can come up with.
Okay. So let me understand, what am I supposed to throw at you so for
The
you to
game
respond
is,
to? Yeah.
let's generate together, brainstorm how many ideas we can give to people on actionable ideas for professional service providers to get more customers. One idea.
Okay.
One simple idea. You go, then I go. You go, then I go.
Okay. So let's see if I understand this. So would I tell you maybe something about tone of voice and then you can then riff on that, or
A
how, give me an
strategy.
example of what it
Okay,
would sound
so
like.
generate content, right? If you can generate content that speaks to the client market and you should do it at least once a week, you're going to get more exposure. People that exist that know that you solve a specific problem will at least know that you exist, which will build authority and can create potential inquiries for that. You go.
And then I'm supposed to give a tip or respond to what you just said.
Just a tip. Yeah,
Oh, okay, okay. All right.
another idea. Like what
Okay.
could be a quick thing that could help someone quickly think about getting more customers.
Okay. I'm going to do a yes and. So when you create content, the best kind of content to me is if you can demonstrate that your expertise versus talk about it in theory. So whenever possible, if you can show your expertise, people are going to be drawn to you. So if you're a service professional and you bake pies or whatever it is, you're like, well, bake pies. That's what you should do. If you're a sales coach, do sales role plays so that you can demonstrate how you actually work with people and to create that transformative moment. I'm all about now demonstrating and showing evidence that you know how to do what it is that you say you know how to do.
I've been hearing that the talking head content is being less engaging and you live being caught doing a whiteboard session or being on stage, being caught in your magical moment, talking about a specific thing with passion. That social proof is also equally or even more valuable because people will see you in a space where they imagine hiring you doing the thing that they want you to do.
Right. It's the difference between telling somebody how a magic trick is going to be done versus just performing it for them.
It's great. Do you have another idea how people can get more customers?
Yes. Do not try to do so much in one piece of content to move somebody from cold traffic all the way to I'm ready to buy from you. So we can break it down to make a piece of content to build awareness of the problem, of the solution, create desire for it, and then have a call to action for something that would be of interest to them. Usually this is referred to as a lead magnet. So you're just gently walking people through a multifaceted curriculum of increasing value. That's like what Seth Godin would describe in permission marketing. Get them to volunteer and give them increasing pieces of value as they volunteer to participate in a long-term marketing program. The mistake is when you send out an email, you're trying to do it all. Raise the problem, create interest, desire, and convert them all in an email. Why don't you send out one email and just create awareness? And then another email, it's like, okay, now if you're interested, here's the next thing. And then the desire and then conversion.
So less is more and nurture it.
Nurture, chunk it down a little bit at a time.
Make it simple.
Yeah.
The lead magnet idea is something that I learned about, how do you build one of these things? And I really like the insight that goes behind the lead magnet, or, when you're building a product, there are these four components that I learned about, right? Where you're addressing the pain of that specific person, then you kind of bring out the dream outcome. And that structure is really nice. Then talk about, the call to action, or here's my solution, here's the solution to that, right? So you're overwhelmed, you're overworked, you're underpaid, and you don't have enough time because you're saying yes to low price, low paid work, and you want to try to be able to charge more, but you don't know where to start. Imagine being able to pick the clients that you want rather than you just trying to say yes to anything just to make ends meet. Imagine blank, blank, and blank.
Yeah. Here's a tip also for people who are selling service professionals to understand that pricing is positioning. The story of the price communicates a lot more than you think. So whenever you're shopping for something, pay attention to how you feel about the product. And it could be food or it could be shampoo. It doesn't really matter. In terms of just looking at the price, is the one that's $10 better than the one that's $5 that's better than the one that's $2? And the person who always chooses the most expensive or the cheapest one says a lot about their preferences and their values. Some people I know go for the maxed out version of everything they can buy. The example would be a laptop. You buy a laptop, I want maximum RAM, I want the fastest video card, I want the largest hard drive space with the fastest Ultra X GPU, whatever it is. That's one type of person. The other person's like, well, I don't need all that. I'm going to buy the bare bones basement thing, like it barely works. It says something about them. And here's the thing that you need to know. When you put out your price relative to competitors, are you going to be the maxed out option or the it barely works option? Because that's who you're going to attract into your business.
Right on. I also think about in the spirit of pricing is not pricing, your time can also have a consequence, right? If you have a free consultation call on your website, it could say a lot about, how much you care about your time. And it attracts tire kickers, price shoppers, or even solicitors. If you have like a Calendly or like a scheduling link to it, and I have found that to be a hard lesson. Put a paywall in front of your consultation call, and that already positions you as someone different. It's like, well, everybody else is doing it for free. Why is this person charged? They must be giving me a different kind of result. So rather than you trying to get 10 website leads that would book 10 booking calls, of which 8 do not show up, and 2 of them are shopping for price, rather than wasting your time and energy and resources on that, put a paywall in front of it. Maybe you get 1 lead per week, but it's someone that's already got skin in the game. And you're going to have much higher likelihood of attracting the kind of client that you want.
I'd like to think of this next concept as something that's original I came up with, but I'm sure it's not. Because every time I think I came up with something new, somebody's already done it, and it's just I'm not that well informed. So I love the reverse discount. We all know that if we put something on sale, we discount it, the steeper the discount, the more likely you are to spur people to buy. But what it does is it creates a culture of people waiting for sales. I'm guilty of this because now I won't buy products from companies that I know are going to go on sale. Because the worst feeling that you have after buying something that you love is to realize the day after they discounted it by whatever. It doesn't matter if it's $50 or $5,000. It doesn't feel good to throw money away. And the way you get around this is you say, I'm going to raise the price. The price is going up in March. And if you wait, you'll pay the new price. And this has to be real. This is not something that you manufacture, and you have to be able to live with this. Because as soon as you start to behave in ways that are not consistent, people are like, I know the ploy that you're using. We've done this many, many times, and it's worked really well. Let me give you an example. When we first launched our very first course called Typography, I told people that the price when we're ready to sell it will be $99, let's just say. I don't remember the exact price. But while we're still developing it, it's not a finished product. You can buy it for $49 or $69, and you're going to save yourself a lot of money. So I'm planting the anchor. It's going to be this new price, but only during this period, you can buy it for this price. And so a bunch of people wound up buying it, and we wound up doing 6 figures in sales pre-launch. That gave me a lot of incentive to finish the course. And then I finished the course, and we set the price at what we said we were going to do it for. And then we got even more sales. And now we have proof that people have purchased it. We have stories about it. So it's a great way to launch a product, to say the price will be this. If you act quickly, because we want to reward people who act quickly, this is the price. Okay. And over time, the prices just increase. So one of the promises we make to people is If I can help it, all our courses and everything we do will just get more expensive over time. So you can feel safe in your investment with us because you'll feel like the genius that you are when you bought today as opposed to the new price. There are still some people who pay me the original 1 hour coaching price versus the current price, which is $5,000 an hour. Those people are feeling like geniuses because they were kind of locked in at a lower rate.
Got it. So the early bird gets the worm. It's the idea of just buying into to not to not be taxed in the future if you wait.
Yes.
Yeah.
Give them a reason to buy today, otherwise it will buy tomorrow. And the
Yep.
reason will be the price is going up. So the pro membership, I just put out a post on it today. It said and I've announced it so people have plenty of notice. When we hit 300 members, I've realized my price is too cheap. So the pro membership will be now $500, 2x what it used to be. And so before we even ran our webinar, we're going to probably hit our 300 number really soon because an email was sent out and Carrie tells me every minute a sale goes down. So we're really fast approaching this. I think we're up to 290 people. So we haven't even started officially selling it yet, which is kind of wild.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So the strategy does need to change too when you have specific product ecosystem, because there are all these traditional things that a lot of people are already familiar with, right? Like create wait lists, do a bunch of webinars. And in the knowledge economy that we're in, we're trying to, when everyone's sort of doing the same thing, it becomes saturated, right? And so we got to find some continuously creative strategies to generate leads, interest, opportunities to generate customers. What have you found in your, and that was one insight, but what have you found, or what do you think is the future of lead gen, knowing that some of these strategies that are now popularly known to do and becoming more saturated are going to essentially drown the market, and it's going to make it harder for people to do lead gen?
Yes, I would encourage people, and we're doing this ourselves now, instead of doing more and don't worry about the competition, just do better. I've heard from people who literally have one or two pieces of content that are so good that it generates almost all of their leads. So instead of doing more versions of something, get what you're doing that's working and make it the best thing that you can so that you know it's performing. So we're doing a series of workshops now, literally the same one. It's called Client Acquisition Machine, a way to turn content to clients, converting content to clients, right? And I did iteration number 1. I'm going to do iteration number 2 in a couple of days. And then I'll just keep doing this until this becomes a really refined thing that I know gives tremendous value, but also creates appetite for people to say, if this was this good, I need to know more and I want to continue down this path with you, with us, right?
Right.
And I'm trying to get over this idea that we have to constantly invent or reinvent new things because it can be very tiring and you'll burn out and you don't actually get really good pieces of content. So some of the coaches I know who are doing like $5-10 million a year, they have basically one or two pieces of content that generate most of their leads. And so if they could, they just keep promoting those videos or that content and spend their money and time there. Our friend Daniel Priestley, he literally runs the same webinar. I think it's been 5+ years now, every single week. And he loves doing it because it's super refined at this point. You can show up and not even try and it'll be really good. So I think we have to get away from this desire to do new and different when we need to do less but better.
I love that. And it brings it back to the original tip we were giving people to do in becoming better at selling, right? It's like you got to do the same thing over and over again so you can just become masterful in being able to do that. And if you're going to create a specific piece of content that you think is going to be valuable, that it's going to showcase your level of authority and expertise and be able to solve someone's small problem maybe at that moment, but the bigger problem if they decide to engage with you at a deeper level, like join your future group or hire you for a 1 hour pick my brain or whatever other ways, and for any others that are providing services. I think that's a really insightful idea, and I'm thinking about mine now, but that's huge.
You know what? While we're talking, Carrie just messaged me. We're up to 295 now.
Wow.
Yeah, it's how effective it is. And this is crazy, Carlos. So whether this makes the episode or not, historically speaking, we do promotion, we do a webinar, and then we convert on the webinar. And we can pick up a few people. We can pick up dozens of people. But what we're doing is we're selling before we even have the webinar now, just by letting people know the price is increasing. So what we're planning to do is to gradually raise the price after we hit every milestone. So from 300 to 400 members, it'll be $500 per person for every month. And from 400 to 500, it'd be $1,000 per person. And it might get to 2,000. I'm not quite sure. So there's a roadmap here, and we tell people what the roadmap is going to be. And so it'll be real interesting on the next webinar where I say, last time I said this, this was the price, and now this is the price. So they're going to say,
they're
like,
feel
oh,
like the
this
geniuses.
sucks.
Oh, well,
Right?
yeah,
They're going to say, this sucks.
Waited.
I missed the boat.
Yeah, the ones that waited. Yeah.
Yeah, I waited, and this freaking FOMO, it's like, I now need to act because Chris is serious. He's not playing games with us because I don't play games like that. I'm just going to be real straight with everybody. Everybody's like, oh, it's some crazy ploy. It's not. It's because our pricing is just too low relative to the value that we deliver.
Of course. Now, is the product the Pro Group membership or the product the client acquisition machine like program or what's
this is a good question. The product right now is the Pro Group. So we're selling the Pro Group, but we're charging people to attend the webinar workshop, $99 to join us on the client acquisition webinar.
So you're paid.
I think I'm a good teacher. Give me $100, I'll give you more value than $100. Second agreement, right? Agreement number 2. So I'm going to make sure I deliver more value. And then if you like that, join the Pro Group. We'll have a special offer for people who do. And if not, great. We'll just make money on that. So that now, I have a new number for that too. Let me see where that number is. We're at 43 people who have paid us $100 to join that. So if nothing else happens, we've made $4,300 in revenue. But more importantly, it's attracting the right kinds of people to join our webinars. So you know this, whenever we do a LinkedIn or something live, free training, lots of people from the internet who like us will show up, but they don't have the ability to buy anything from us, which is great for them, not so great for our business model.
Sure.
So one of the big insights we got was get people to pay to apply to be part of your program. They're more committed already.
I love it. Yeah, it's filtering, right? You're just putting a little bit of a paywall and it's skin in the game too.
A little bit,
like,
yeah.
oh, this is optional. This is just going to take my time. I could be doing my groceries while I listen to this LinkedIn audio or webinar. Or, hey, I paid $100. I'm going to sit in front of the Zoom and I'm going to take all the notes because I want to get my money's worth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will give you your money's worth.
That's very cool. I'll definitely show up to the next one just to.
You should, please.
Listen in.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All pro members are allowed to come.
Awesome.
That's another perk, right? So
yeah, I'm a pro member. So
yeah, you just come, sit in there and check it out.
I love it, man. I got one last question. Okay. If you have some 5 minutes left to talk about
Let's do it. 5 minutes. Let's go.
I saw a recent video where you were talking about like AI and you put in the whiteboard, like you could use this or you could use that and that'll help you become better at what you do. But the power of being able to use AI together is a unique way where you can build value in how you are enabled to creatively solve problems, maybe more effectively or uniquely for people. And I thought that point of view was huge. So I want to just coming off of that. And I guess my last question is, we know that AI is rapidly evolving and it's going to change our role as we provide service and support to people with our expertise. What do we need to know about and what message do you have for those who are either being resistant or, I don't know, hesitant about embracing AI as a way to enable us to differentiate and better position ourselves for the future?
Right. So the future marches on whether you are on the train or not. The future is undefeated. If you say like, I love my horse, so I want to travel around this country on a horse, I'm like, well, how'd that work out? The cars replace the horse. The electric car is going to replace the internal combustion engine, ICE engines. It's just going to be this way. The internet has replaced snail mail. Things keep getting supplanted and replaced. So the last part is, will you be replaced and what are you going to do? So when we have incredibly powerful technologies and tools to use that are available to almost everybody in a very democratic way, because they could charge us thousands of dollars to use this and it would eliminate a lot of people from having access, but they charge tens of dollars to do this. And so you would kind of be shooting yourself in the foot if you don't take advantage of this. Daniel Priestley said something during one of his member meetups. He goes, I believe AI will be the lead generator of multi-billion dollars worth of value or net worth. The problem is it will not be distributed evenly. Mm-hmm. Right? Recently, I think I saw this where Elon Musk is trying to do a hostile takeover bid to OpenAI,
Open it.
and the number was $100 billion. To put that
Jesus.
in perspective, when Zuckerberg offered the founders of Instagram $1 billion for Instagram, everyone said Zuckerberg is crazy. He's on a spending spree. This is ridiculous. So think now a company that's been in existence only for a couple of years being now offered $100 billion and saying, not for us. What a world we're
Wow.
living in. This is amazing. And everybody knows this. The great next race is in the AI race, and whoever wins will take it all.
Yeah.
Okay? How does that affect you as a service provider? Well, integrate these technologies into what you do. Pretty much everything that you do that you are like, I wonder if I can get help with this, AI can help you. This way, you're going to elevate yourself to the person with the ideas, directing the vision, curating what is good and bad, and using your sense of taste and value to determine what it is you want to make. Give you one use case right now that we're implementing inside the Future program. Number one, we've been deficient in accountability. We don't track what people are doing because we think everyone's an adult. You be responsible. But I realize people are going out of business under our watch or our kind of neglect in this case. So we said, you know, everybody who wants to, please build your profit and loss statement. Give us that one sheet and we will look at this with you each quarter and we'll monitor it once it's been correct to make sure if we see an iceberg coming that we prevent you from crashing headfirst into it.
Wow.
So people have already submitted their P&Ls and we've looked at it and Carrie and I are looking at it together. We're like, oh my God, this person's already losing money. They're not going to be able to survive given their current trajectory. They're literally losing money every month, Carlos. So what are we going to do? And I said, well, Gary, I'm not an accountant, neither are you. How do we resolve this? And my first instinct was, I need to call up a bookkeeper, accountant person, somebody with a financial background. Let's get them in here and get them to monitor all this stuff. And then I thought, wait a minute. Screen capture the spreadsheet. Make sure no sensitive information in there. It's just numbers. We have attached to no identities at all. We have to safeguard our members' identities.
Of course.
We run it through it. We asked it to do an analysis review, ask questions, and make recommendations.
Through
And
AI.
pretty
through
much,
ChatGPT.
yeah, through ChatGPT, the professional $200 version, I believe. And then she runs it through that and she goes, here's what it said. And she read them off to me. And I'm like, that's exactly what we said, except for using very professional accounting language, which we would not have done. And I would have probably sent through our recommendations, but I feel much more confident that the GPT has basically given us its stamp of approval. And we are curating and making sure like we think this, it thinks this, but it's going to write a more detailed report and we can send it through. Now, what did we do? We were able to better serve our community, our customers, but we're also able to confirm that we know what we're talking about, which we do. Yeah. And then lastly, we don't have to add to our payroll to have another person do this, right? So for the time being, we have to manually copy paste and see what it says and make sure we agree. And if enough repetitions, we can use the same robot and just keep feeding it things to copy paste and now feed it to each person. So it's streamlining the whole process. Everyone is going to have a little higher level of accountability and just to make sure somebody is watching over them, which is what we want to be able to do. That would be an example. Unfortunately, for the community of accountants out there, like, oh, there goes another job that's taken away from an accountant. That is true. But what's stopping you from using AI to enhance and increase your productivity? So the war is going to be with the robot. If the robot's going to replace you, and it's very hard for you to fight against the robot because it never gets tired, it never sleeps, and it knows more than you, is you make a robot to fight the robot. It'll be a battle between the robots.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's just creative problem solving, leveraging, being tech enabled, and it's going to be more valuable. It's like, how would you leverage AI to solve my problem? It's really going to be the differentiator. And it's the combination of all the tools and the usefulness of it. Because even if I'm not smart enough to know what to ask it, at least I'm willing to prompt, what should I ask you? This is my problem, right? Like, that's more valuable, right? It's helping people really get in tune in the creative solving, problem solving. And I think that's something that you have quoted before from Seth Godin, that's going to be, the future will continue to increase in value is how our human creative problem solving skills are going to help us using what's around us in our environment. That's what's going to make us valuable ultimately. I think we can close on that note, man. It's been awesome chatting with you and jamming with you.
Likewise, man.
I can't believe it's been an hour and 20 minutes, but it's all been awesome. I know that you and I can probably do this for hours.
Yeah, it's been real fun. I love the conversation.
But no, thanks, man. I appreciate it. We'll share all the information in the show notes. I know this was just you and I casually having a conversation. I'll go ahead and do the intros and outros later, and I'll send you the stuff.